If you sent out 200 applications for cybersecurity jobs and heard nothing back, the problem might not be your resume. It might be that you're competing just in the wrong market. Your first cybersecurity job might not have the word security in the title, and that actually might be the smarter move here. I know that's frustrating to hear. You've earned certifications, you've studied security concepts, you've built a home lab, you've done everything the career advice says to do, and you're still getting either silence or generic rejection emails from every SOC analyst position you apply to. But here's what I want you to understand. You're not unqualified. You're just competing in one of the most saturated entry points in technology while potentially ignoring pathways that could get you to the same destination, maybe even faster. So first, there's a competition problem, right? Entry-level cybersecurity positions receive extraordinary application volume. A single SOC analyst position, can attract hundreds of candidates, many with nearly identical backgrounds. Security plus certification, check. A degree in cybersecurity or information technology, check. Maybe a home lab, check. Limited professional experience, check. When a hiring manager is looking at a stack of nearly identical resumes, differentiation becomes very difficult. The candidates who often stand out have one things many others lack, right? Hands-on experience, working with the actual systems that need to be secured. Meanwhile, at the same time, the same organization, a help desk position or a junior systems admin role may receive a fraction of the applications. Both of those roles can build directly relevant skill. Both can lead to internal transfers into cybersecurity. But because they don't have security in the title, many candidates ignore them entirely. That's a strategic error. What security teams actually need? Security isn't an isolated discipline. It sits on top of infrastructure that has to be understood to be protected efficiently, right, and effectively. Think about what a SOC analyst actually does. You're investigating an authentication error failure, right? To do that well, you need to understand how Active Directory works, how Kerberos authentication happens, what normal login patterns look like. Someone who has actually supported Active Directory in a systems admin role will recognize anomalies, that someone with only theoretical knowledge may miss. Or take a cloud security engineer reviewing, identity and access management policies. You need to understand how permissions inheritance works, right? How service accounts are used, what developers actually need access to. If you deploy cloud infrastructure, you understand the context. If you only read about cloud security in a textbook, you don't, right? Hiring managers know this. They often rarely hire someone with strong operational IT experience and teach them security concepts that hire someone that knows security theory but lacks the potential context to apply it effectively. I've seen this play out when evaluating candidates for security roles. We had candidates who looked stronger on paper from a pure cybersecurity perspective. They had cybersecurity degrees, certifications, and can talk about security concepts really well. But another candidate came from an IT operations background. They had spent years troubleshooting systems, dealing with Active Directory, permissions, networking issues, patching, and all the everyday problems that happen in a real environment. When we started asking scenario-based questions, the difference became pretty obvious. If I gave them an authentication issue, the candidates with mostly academic security experience would usually start with the security controls. The person with the operations background started asking questions about the environment. Is this happening to one or multiple users? What changed recently? What do the authentication logs show? Is this actually malicious, or could something be misconfigured? They understood that before you can determine whether something is a security problem. You first have to understand how the system is supposed to work. That's incredibly valuable in security. We teach someone to use a particular tool. It's much harder to quickly teach years of troubleshooting experience and the intuition that comes from working with real systems. That's why IT experience shouldn't be viewed as something separate, from your cybersecurity career. In many cases, it's exactly what makes you a better cybersecurity, at cybersecurity itself once you get there. This doesn't mean security knowledge is unimportant. It means security knowledge without operational context is just incomplete. You know, as far as the internal mobility advantage here, there's two big advantages to considering IT roles as part of your cybersecurity career strategy. The first is reduced competition, which we've already talked about, right? The second is more internal mobility, and this one is less obvious but potentially more valuable. Organizations prefer to promote or transfer employees they already know. An internal candidate has already passed background checks, learned the company processes, demonstrated reliability, and built relationships. The security team has likely interacted with you. They've seen how you work. They know whether you ask good questions, follow through on tasks, and handle responsibility well. When a security position does open up, that internal help desk analyst who helped the SOC team during the last phishing incident, who learned the SIM tool, who showed genuine interest in security work, right? That person has credibility an external resume can't match. So getting hired into an IT role at an organization with an active security team may actually provide better access to security opportunities than remaining unemployed while sending applications into the void. As far as which IT role builds which security skills, now I know not all IT roles go ahead and build the same skills, right? The pathway you choose should align with your security goals. Help desk to security operations or identity access management. Help desk gives you troubleshooting skills and understanding of user behavior, familiarity with endpoint issues. You learn how users actually work, what mistakes they make, what compromised accounts look like. That translates directly into identity access management support. SOC work focused on user behavior or security operation roles handling endpoint security. Network support to network security or SOC. Network support develops skills in traffic analysis, protocols, network architecture. You learn TCP/IP at a practical level, understand routing and switching, work with firewalls and VPNs. That maps directly to network security engineering, intrusion detection, and SOC analyst work that requires understanding network-based threats. System administration to security engineering. System admin work builds the skills in server hardening, patch management, logging and monitoring, scripting and automation. You learn how systems are actually configured and maintained in production environments. That's foundational for security engineering, vulnerability management, compliance roles, security architecture as a whole. Cloud support to cloud security. Cloud support teaches infrastructure as code, permissions modules, API interactions, cloud service architectures. That practical knowledge is essential for cloud security engineering, where you have to secure infrastructure you genuinely understand. The pattern is consistent. Operational experience with systems creates the foundation that makes security work effective rather than theoretical. So how do you go ahead and choose the right role? It's a good question, right? Start with the security specialization that interests you, then work backward to identify which IT roles build relevant skills. If you want to work in identity and access management, prioritize help desk roles, desktop support, or identity and access management support roles where you'll work with Active Directory, Okta, Azure AD, stuff like that. If network security interests you, target network support, NOC positions, junior network engineer roles, where you'll work with firewall switches, routers, network monitoring tools. If you want cloud security, look for cloud support roles, DevOps support, junior cloud engineer roles, at organizations using major cloud platforms. And here's something critical. Go ahead and prioritize organizations that have dedicated security teams. A help desk role at a company with an active SOC, a security engineering team, and a mature security program provides exposure and internal mobility that a similar role at a small company without dedicated security staff doesn't. During interviews, ask about the security organization. Ask how IT teams interact with security. You want an environment where security is visible and valued. And to go ahead and kind of make the most of an IT role. If you take this approach, understanding that an IT role is not a passive waiting period. It's an active preparation opportunity. Volunteer for security adjacent work. When the security team needs help deploying endpoint protection, raise your hand. When there's a security incident, offer to assist. Make yourself useful to the security team in ways that build your skills and your visibility. Learn the security tools your organization actually uses. If your company has a SIM, learn how it works. If there's a vulnerability scanner, understand what it does. If you have access to real production security tools that most external candidates don't, build relationships with the security team members. Ask questions. Show genuine interest when a security position opens. Not by complaining about your current role, but by communicating that you're interested in transitioning to the security work when appropriate opportunities arise. Continue learning security concepts outside work hours. Earn relevant certifications, right? Work on security projects. The combination of hands-on IT experience and demonstrated security knowledge is more compelling than either alone. So you may be asking, so when doesn't this apply? Now, this isn't a universal prescription, of course. Everyone's different. Some of you should continue applying directly to security roles. If you have relevant prior experience, military, cybersecurity work, previous IT roles with security responsibilities, internships in security operations, you may be competitive for direct entry security positions. If you have a strong technical background in software development, network engineering, or system architecture, you may be able to enter security at a higher level than typical entry points. If you're receiving interviews and advancing in security hiring processes, your current strategy may be working. The right path depends on your specific circumstances. But if your current approach has really worked after months of effort, you need to ask yourself whether you're being strategic or simply stubborn. As far as what employers actually care about, this is an important one too. So employers care about what you can actually do. They want to know if you can read logs, understand authentication mechanisms, interpret network traffic, write scripts, troubleshoot cloud infrastructure, investigate security incidents. You can build many of those capabilities in IT roles, sometimes more directly than in narrowly scoped entry-level security positions. When you eventually apply to security positions, you'll translate your IT experience into security-relevant language. You won't describe your help desk job as password resets. You'll explain how you investigated endpoint security alerts, supported multi-factor authentication deployment, identified compromised accounts, worked with the security team during incidents. The work you did matters. The title on your business card during that work matters far less than you think. So kind of wrap all this up, a final thought, right, is your career path doesn't need to be linear. It needs to be strategic. It needs to build skills that security hiring managers actually value. It needs to create opportunities that move you toward your goals. If applying exclusively to security positions isn't creating those opportunities, it might be time to compete in a different market. This week, identify 3 IT roles at companies with active security teams that would build skills aligned with your security career goals. Apply to these positions with the same effort you've been putting into security applications. The fastest path into cybersecurity may not be the most obvious one. It may be the one you've been overlooking because it doesn't have the right words in the job title. Stop optimizing for titles. Start optimizing for experience, skills, and access to the opportunities you actually want. So subscribe for more of this every week, and I'll see you in the next one.